No.
Let me just very quickly say, for those of you who might be coming to the meeting at a later date to review our recording, our apologies. You missed about 3 minutes of the meeting. We've approved the minutes and started very briefly our auditor's presentation, and she'll continue it now.
Thank you. As far as the executive summary, we have issued an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion on the financial statements for the town of Mansfield as of June 30th, 2023. It's the best opinion available. It pretty much means that all of the amounts are fairly stated in accordance with our accounting standards. We did not have any findings reported in internal control and compliance, so there were no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. However, we did have a couple of suggestions for improvements to controls in the management letter. There were 3 different suggestions, I guess, 3 different points that we made in the management letter. The first had to do with general ledger maintenance. So that was a result of entries and adjustments being made to the cash accounts and the accounts payable accounts, which resulted in some revised bank reconciliations and kind of late adjustments to cash and AP. So we are recommending that the town just kind of fine-tune the close procedures to make sure that accounts payable is correctly stated at the cutoff at June 30th, 2024. The next 2 points are really just suggestions to improve your security and control over your assets. So as we know, that's in the news every day, cyber attack. So we're just recommending that you kind of look at your cyber policies, perhaps have some third party look at your security, do some penetration testing. And then also we're suggesting instituting a fraud tip hotline. And that just is due to the fact that most of the tips for fraud come from internal. They're really not from the external auditors or what have you. So it's an important, tool in your toolkit to make sure that fraud does not occur in the town. Okay, moving on to the federal and state single audit. We also issued a clean opinion on the one major federal program that was selected for testing. We did not have any findings or significant deficiencies in internal control over compliance. And also for the state, clean opinion on the one major state program that was selected for testing. And again, no compliance findings or significant deficiencies. So clean opinion on everything. And no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. So as I stated before, this is a high level look at the financial statements. This chart comes from the MD&A from the ACFR. So this chart is sort of aggregating all the data together for governmental activities and business type activities and bringing it to the full accrual basis. So your funds of the town are on a modified accrual basis. And so this is adding to it your long-term assets and your long-term liabilities. So you will see presented here, capital assets and the debt of the town. So just looking from 2022 to 2023, there were some changes that occurred in the governmental activities that I'm just going to note. You did have addition of about $15 million construction in progress. So you'll see that your capital assets increased from 2022 to 2023 because you are doing some capital projects. As a result, or I guess because of those capital projects, you did issue debt. So in turn, your liabilities also increased. You issued a $7 million bond. And I guess you had a bond anticipation note, which you turned into long-term debt. So that's kind of a change too. In addition, the pension liability of the town increased about $10 million. So that is another reason for the liabilities increasing. So from 2022 to 2023, the net position went from 120 million in governmental activities to 134 million. And then in business type activities, really nothing to note, pretty static from last year to this year. You can see from 2022 to 2023, none of the categories really changed that much. Your net position went from about 13.9 to 13.6. So no real big change there. Looking at the major funds of the town, the general fund, debt service fund, the ARPA fund, and capital projects fund. And then the smaller funds are aggregated together into that fifth column, non-major governmental funds. The general fund had an increase, and I'm looking towards the bottom of the slide. The general fund had an increase in fund balance from 2022 to 2023 of 1.656 million. Fund balance at the end of the year is with 11.1 million in the general fund. Debt service fund had an increase of 1.7 million. So ending June 30th, 2023 with about 2.5 million in debt service. The ARPA fund does not have fund balance because it recognizes revenue to the extent you had expenditures. So you'll see that the revenue equals the expenditures. Capital projects had a large change in fund balance of 5.7 million from 1.2 million to about 7 million. And the major reason for that, two things. There was a large transfer into the fund. Again, you have capital project, so that's why the money was transferred in there. And also you had a $7 million, as I mentioned before, issuance of debt. So in governmental accounting, we record new debt as revenue in the fund. And then the non-major governmental funds had an increase in fund balance from 5.7 million to 9.3. So that's an increase of 3.6. So overall, in the last column, you had an increase in fund balance of 12.8 million from 17.1 to about 30 million at June 30th, 2023. As far as the general fund budget, revenues came in 141,000 over budget and expenditures came in about $1 million under budget. So that's good news, obviously. The pension liability is 22 million. It increased about 10.2 million from last year. And I know the town is in the state plan, so I know you don't really have any control over that. The OPEB liability, and just to remind you, OPEB is other post-employment benefits. So that's, retiree health care and other benefits that you're paying retirees. That liability, the net liability is 737,000. That decreased 368,000 from 22 to 23. Federal single audit, the town spent 3.8 million. We tested the ARPA program. Again, we had a clean opinion. We did not have any findings. And the state single audit, the town spent 38.5 million. We tested the tiered pilot program. And again, no findings. We had a clean opinion on that program. As far as the auditor's communication, this is a required communication from CLA to those charged with governance, which is this committee. The town implemented a new accounting policy, which is GASB 96, which is subscription-based information technology arrangements. We did not record it because it was not material to the financial statements. We do have estimates in the financial statements, as does every municipality. What we are required to do as auditors is to look at these estimates a little more closely to make sure management does not have control over overstating or understating these estimates, that there's no management bias, that you're not trying to overstate or understate liabilities or assets. So those estimates are as follows. The useful lives of capital assets are used to calculate depreciation expense. The net pension liability and OPEB liability, an actuary is utilized to calculate those liabilities based upon management's assumptions. Not so much for the pension, I know that's the state plan. For the allowance for doubtful accounts, taxes receivable, management looks at kind of historical information to look at, what the non-payment was of taxes receivable to estimate that amount. Claims incurred but not reported for medical, that is a third party that estimates kind of that run out of claims. And then a third party is also utilized to estimate the landfill closure and post-closure. So we did not find any management bias when we looked at these estimates. We did not have any disagreements with management. Management did not consult with other accountants for a second opinion on an accounting standard. Obviously, the completion of the audit was delayed. We're really hoping to get back on track this year. We did not have any corrected misstatements, but we did, as I mentioned in the previous slide, we have an uncorrected misstatement because the implementation of GASB 96 is immaterial to the town. So this is something that we have to keep track of. If this amount for GASB 96 ever becomes larger, we will have to implement that standard. So this is just our way of kind of tracking that amount. And we are independent of the town. As far as the new GASB standards for June 30th, 2024, Statement 99 is kind of a clarifying standard for some previous standards that were issued. So just some small changes you probably won't notice. Statement 100 has to do with the presentation in the financial statements if there's an error or an accounting change. So if a non-major fund becomes a major fund or a major fund becomes non-major, that will have to be presented differently. Historically, it kind of just happened in the background. It was just a change in how the financial statements look, but now we'll have to call that out. And that might happen with your ARPA fund because you're getting towards the end of spending that money. So that might become a non-major fund. So that is for 6/30/24. For 6/30/25, there are new rules around compensated absences. So we will talk about that when we get to it. There's also a new statement having to do with certain risk disclosures. So the GASB has dreamed up some new risks that could impact municipalities if there's a concentration or constraint. For example, if the municipality has all of their employees in one union, that's a concentration that could have to be disclosed. And then in 2026 is the standard that we've all been waiting for. Supposed to change the way that the financial statements looked, but that they started talking about this 10 years ago and it really hasn't come to fruition, thankfully. So there's just a few minor tweaks that you'll see in 2026 to your financial statements. And that is it for the presentation. So I will open it up to questions and stop sharing.
Great, thank you. Just to sort of put it into layman's terms,
Yeah.
My understanding looking at this and hearing your presentation is that you essentially found no issues with the town's financials, and the only concerns are just some sort of policy decisions around cybersecurity and some other things, and then some of the changes to GAAP moving forward. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Questions from the committee?
I
Right,
did notice one thing you recommended putting in whistleblower
Yep,
policy
yep.
as well as what was the
Cyber.
second one that had to do with internal fraud
Yep.
Fraud hotline.
hotline. Are the two in tandem? Aren't they in tandem?
Cybersecurity and the fraud
No,
hotline, is
the
that what you're asking?
whistleblower versus the internal fraud.
Those
One
two are
is-
combined completed. So the recommendation is to revise our whistleblower policy and also implement a fraud hotline while revising that policy.
Gotcha.
Found one that we're gonna look into getting. It's only $250 a year, and then I'll work with the policy committee on revising our current policy to incorporate that into our plan.
That seems wise. And as well as moving to the subscription-based IT. Is that as a result of that, or am I misunderstanding
No,
that?
that's, you might be conflating those two. No, the subscription-based IT arrangements was a new standard where the GASB is requiring municipalities to capitalize any software subscription agreement. So the town did not have any types of contracts that met those qualifications that were material. There was, I think, maybe one that met the qualifications, but it was a small amount, so we did not have to record it.
Gotcha. Okay, sounds good.
Yep.
other questions, Chris?
Yeah, so I was just curious, the fraud hotline, I'm not sure. Can you discuss that more and how that's accommodated in other communities our size or what you've seen?
Yeah, so I guess it's different. I think it's important for the fraud hotline, obviously, to go to someone, at least two people first, right? And a lot of times the town attorney is involved in some way. Maybe it's the best thing for you to talk to the town attorney about the best way to do this. Because, you know, again, there should be two people involved. And if you have to kind of carve management out of it, just in case the tip is about management.
And
So-
how does it functionally work? I mean, what, again, can you cite some other town that,
Yeah,
Well,
so
it's-
there's a couple services, and Amanda, I think maybe you researched this a little. There's some services that I think kind of provide a platform to receive these comments to make it, you know, user friendly. So you're not kind of you're not inventing the process.
Had one at my previous employer, and you select who receives these anonymous complaints, I would call them. And again, as Vanessa mentioned, it's smart to have the town attorney roped in on that so that management isn't getting complaints about itself. So it just allows kind of a more free way for anonymous complaints and concerns to be made and then independently researched.
So
I
it
mean,
sounds like you're talking about like the typical, you know, the federal government
Yeah.
does that, you know, pretty seamlessly. So the same type of process. A safe
and-
space where people can report and it will be investigated
Correct.
and management will be out of that process. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just a best practice. It's just a recommendation. If you don't feel that you need it, that's certainly fine. It's just, you know, we're just trying to recommend some best practices.
Mhm.
So we already have a whistleblower policy and policies and procedures for this, but we don't have,
The
Yes.
hotline.
right, it essentially connects you, like town manager is the person who anyone who's complaining about anything that's not the town manager would go to, and then there's a process if the complaint is about the town manager, but it's not a hotline, right? It's not just like a anonymous tip line kind of thing. Is that
Yep.
right?
That is correct.
Yeah, so right now, as it stands, we have a fraud prevention policy and a whistleblower policy. Those have been on the books for a while, so maybe something just for the the committee's, review and knowledge, we can kind of recirculate those so you can see where we're starting as a baseline.
Yeah, that'd be helpful, probably.
That'd be very helpful. Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
Amanda, you commented, and then they'd be investigated independently. What does that mean? Does Vanessa get called in again to look at something? What?
No,
What-
again, go to the town attorney and him and his staff would make the necessary arrangements to look into that.
Okay, so you did say that that would be who might
Yeah.
be on the receiving end of the call, but they would also do the investigation.
Yes, they would, yep.
Okay. Vanessa, have you seen, and what have you seen in this realm that's come up in terms of actual reports, issues? Can you just give me a taste for what might be expected on this in this
I
kind
mean,
of a?
I don't know that I've heard, I know that I have been in situations where if there was such a hotline, it might have helped uncover fraud a little sooner. Because it's tough when there's two people working in the same office. They don't, they might not feel comfortable reporting that fraud to, whomever, because they think it's going to come right back to them. So having something that's a little bit more, structured is important, because they might be more apt to report it. So I can't say that, again, it's just a suggestion for improvement. So you don't have to do it. And I can't say that I can point to, a situation that I've been involved with in that I knew a client had a tip and it resulted in something. It might be a deterrent too, right? So I think that's important.
Do you have a sense of, I don't know, percentages of the towns that you audit that have this?
I do not.
And if we were to not do this, it sounds like we're already well on our way to doing it, but if we were to not do this, is this a mark against us?
No, like I said, it's just a suggestion,
Okay.
that's all it is.
All right.
Best practice.
Thank you.
Yep.
Go ahead, Ben.
Similarly, the sort of suggestions around cybersecurity, without getting into details that would require us to do executive session conversations about it. I know that we do a fair amount of this already. So I guess my question is, did you go through and look at what the IT department is already doing, or is this just sort of a general suggestion that you've made with regard to third-party testing, probing, those kinds of things, the things you mentioned?
Yeah, I don't know that we've gone in detail of what they're doing, but if you think it's adequate, then that's fine.
Okay.
Yep.
Other questions? Bill, do you have anything?
I do not.
Okay.
Ben, I think your question was relevant in that we should find out what Vanessa's people did look at, did do in terms of IT stuff. And if they have specific things. I think that was a really important question, because we've been given the impression, Vanessa, that our IT work is pretty up to date and with it, and kind of always on the move forward. So if yours is just a blanket statement to cover yourselves, so be it. But if you have looked at some of the things that we're doing and found things that we should be doing, we would certainly like to know about those.
Okay.
Yeah, why don't we?
I can look into what we've looked at and get
Yeah.
back to Amanda.
I have some information from our IT director as well in terms of what we do on an annual basis. I did follow up with him after receiving the management letter. So I believe I can
That
share.
may suffice. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, why
Thank
don't we just, Amanda, why don't we just throw on our agenda? So Jamie can be here if we have questions, like at whatever our next meeting is, an executive session to talk about it. Because we don't want to do details in public session, and then it can just a committee conversation, and if there's any difference between what the auditors have recommended and what we're doing, then we can figure that out there.
Yeah, I definitely want to know if the auditors have found some areas of weakness.
Cool. All right, are there anything else about the audit? Then, if not, where am I?
So I don't think I included an AIS item, but I would like the finance committee to recommend the council accept the fiscal year 23 audit reports, please.
It looks like there is an AIS, but it's got the wrong motion in it, I think,
Okay.
so. It's on page 22. But it's the wrong motion, so it doesn't matter. Yeah, would someone like to move that we recommend the council accept the audited financial statements?
It's right to me.
Anybody?
Go ahead, Chris.
Um, I always mess up the wording. I'd like to move that we accept the audited financial statements, the audit of the financial statements.
Seconded by Carlita. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. All right, they are accepted. Are we planning on, we're not planning on doing a similar presentation at the full council meeting, correct?
Or not, no, we
Okay.
normally just put it on consent.
I may unexpectedly be able to attend now, unfortunately. Thank you to the largest wildfire in Jasper National Park's history in Alberta, Canada. My vacation plans have changed. But anyway, we will thank you, Vanessa, and thanks for all your team's work. We appreciate it very much.
Okay, great. Have a
Um,
great night. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
you too.
Thank you, Vanessa.
Bye-bye.
All right, we will move back to the tax sale policy, and Amanda, why don't you lead us into this?
Sure, so we had talked about this at our last meeting. The tax collector has established a policy which he has the right to do so under state statute to go forward with a tax sale and then outlined a clear policy to do so. The one thing that he will need to move forward with this is to utilize the services of Attorney Cohen from Pullman and Comley. So I'm hoping tonight that the finance committee would consider recommending that the town council appoint Pullman and Comley as the town's legal counsel for tax sale matters and authorize the town manager to engage with Pullman and Comley. Attached to this item is the engagement letter from Pullman and Comley, Attorney Cohen's biography, and then the tax sale policy we reviewed last time. I will say that we did talk to Attorney Cohen. A few questions came up about whether if during this tax sale process, someone bid more or less than the taxes owed. So I did just want to clarify for the group. If the bidder bids higher than what is owed to us, we receive what is owed to us and the rest gets turned over to the court system and is held for someone else to claim that. There might be other debtors who are owed money. It might be the person whose house we have now taken from them, but they are able to then apply to get that money. If no one claims it, it goes into unclaimed property until somebody does. In the event that somebody bids less than the amount owed to us, the town can then make that decision on whether or not they're willing to accept less than what is owed to get the property back on the tax roll, or to just hold the property still in tax sale status until someone else comes along, or to just put the property back, not collecting taxes. So there are options if that happens.
But to be clear, you're saying the confirmation, the town, for lack of a better way of putting it, we are made whole. We don't profit from, or we don't end up
Correct.
ahead,
Correct.
receive more than that which is
No,
delinquent.
correct.
On that, Amanda, you mentioned if we receive less than we feel owed, we can deny it. But this tax sale is happening kind of on the move. We can deny the sale after the fact.
So the tax sale is a long process in terms of the legal notices that have to go out, the warnings to several different parties that are involved. So the process is a while. The actual tax sale happens at a singular point in time.
Right.
Literally come to a room and raise up
Right,
numbers.
an auction.
And at that point, yeah, it's like an auction. And at that point, we would exceed the lowest bidder or the highest bidder would be listed. And then after the fact, the town would be able to decide if they were willing to accept.
After the fact.
Correct.
Okay, we can
Just
still deny it.
He's imagining a scenario where once the bidding goes live, if they're all low bids, we can't then have like seller's remorse and say, just kidding.
No,
we're not, but we do have the ability to sort of refuse, just say that we didn't get the auction value that we should have, didn't cover the.
So then in that case, what does actually happen? The property just continues on our delinquent list?
If we choose to not accept that, then yes. If we choose to accept a lower bid, we would write off the remaining tax balance as non-collectible. But then hopefully the purchaser would now be an active taxpayer and it would get the property back on the annual tax roll collecting money for the town rather
I
than.
get that part. Yeah, so we can play at both sides in a sense.
Yes.
Okay.
And so when you say we, what exactly do you mean, right? Because all the council's doing and has the legal authority to do is to appoint the lawyer. And so Gerald effectively can't move forward unless we appoint the attorney. But it's Gerald who has the sole authority to actually execute the sale. We, as a council, don't have the authority to execute the
Okay.
sale. Our tax collector has independent statutory authority. So is he the one who would make the decision about accepting or not accepting bids, or is it something that would go beyond him to management or to the council or both? Or
My
how does that work?
understanding is that it would go back to the full council. The attorney wrote, if nobody is willing to bid the total due on the property, the town has 3 options. It can accept less, the town could choose to take title and own it ourselves, or we could postpone the auction indefinitely. And by saying the town, I would not infer that that is Gerald in his sole discretion. I would think that that's a higher level discussion that would need to take place.
Okay, any other questions about this? Does anyone have any reservations about moving forward with it?
No, I think it's good. We should do it. Appoint him or appoint the firm.
That would be appointing Pullman and Conley, right? As. Okay.
Yeah, there's a pair of drafted motions on page 7.
I was looking for him. I can't find him.
I see wait a minute, that's effective June 24. Right, the one that says recommended.
Page 7, the end of page 7, or the beginning of page 7.
We still having trouble finding page
Mm.
7, your digital packets, or?
In
I
my
am.
digital packet, I'm scrolling down, I'm seeing the old.
You gotta go up.
I found it. I
at the
found it. Here we
beginning
go.
of
I'd like to move effective July 29, 2024, to recommend that the town council appoint the firm Pullman and Comley as the town's legal counsel for tax sale matters. I'd like to further move to authorize the town manager to execute the engagement agreement with Pullman and Comley as presented.
Any discussion? Seconded by Carlita. Is there any discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. All right, motion is adopted. Right, that is the extent of our new business. Is there any communications, other business or future agenda items?
I'll make note of the IT item to talk about cybersecurity.
Okay. And Amanda, if the answer is everything's fine, we
Okay,
don't need to have a whole thing. We just did a whole thing with Jamie at a council meeting recently in executive session. So if everything's
And if I can add to that, my thing is, I assume you're going to talk to the accountant, don't bother Jamie. He's doing what he's done. We want to know what the accountant is agitated by, if anything at all.
right. I agree with that. I will follow up.
all right. Then everything's left is for adjournment.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
Then we are adjourned.
Great. Thank you, Ben.
Good evening, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Amanda.
Have a good night.